Matt, go ahead.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Matt Kegel. I grew up in Chaska. I We're going to talk about white privilege tonight. My story, kind of real quick. Growing up in Chaska, Minnesota, I tell a lot of my college roommates, Minnesota is not just the Great White North because it snows a lot. We're not a very diverse state. And that's something that I didn't realize while I was, you know, in Minnesota, going to school, playing sports and all that. I think there was three people of color on the football team at Chaska High School. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was at least my senior year. Um, yeah, and then I was fortunate enough to go and play football at Oklahoma State, where I went from a predominantly white locker room to now I'm the minority in the room, being a part of a collegiate football program, and it really changed my viewpoints and taught me that it woke me up to like what white privilege was, because I hope everyone's watched the TED Talk. I kind of, when I watched it the first time, I was like, when I first started my journey, I associated myself more with the guy wearing the boat shoes and the polo, because he was so blind to what was going on, and he had never experienced anything like that or seen anything like that before. And the big thing that opened my eyes to my privilege, I kind of had three big things that happened to me when I first got to school. Well, not to me, but I was with people when they happened. Actually, the first week I got to school, one of the senior linemen was driving me around, showing me around. We got pulled over for a tail light. He looked me dead in the eyes. A black kid. He's looking me in the eyes. He said, "Put your hands on the dashboard, or get your ID out. Put your hands on the dashboard, and don't say a word unless he speaks to you." And I've been pulled over before, speeding. I run a red light before. I've had my fair share of getting pulled over, and never once have I thought, like, get everything ready, put your hands on the dashboards, um, you know, don't speak unless spoken to. Like, that's not the first thing that comes into my mind when I get pulled over. My first thought was, damn, I got to call my mom and tell her I get pulled over. Um, Not, fear for my life or anything like that. And that was kind of the first thing that like was like, okay, maybe this is real. I need to start listening. And then we went to we were at Walmart, actually. Me and my roommate both are black, and we were in a line leaving the store. Everyone's walking out, and the person only stopped my roommates to check their receipts. Everyone else in the line was white except for them two, and they only checked our receipt. And it might not seem like a big thing to someone, but like, I noticed it. I was like, wow, that's different. Like, I've never been a part, like, never seen something like that. Um, and then the third incident, which was like the biggest, most outright, like, holy crap, there's like a serious problem going on still that I've been blind to, is we were at a gas station getting gas, and I had walked into the store to pay for the gas, and my roommate was sitting in the passenger seat, and I walked out, and this man was walking towards the car, and he put up the white power sign at my roommate. Um, and like, I immediately locked the door to the car while he was in there. And I quickly uh, paid, got out of there. I was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Sadly, we're in Oklahoma. We are Oklahoma's probably a little, like, probably one of the whitest states in the country, least diverse." And said, it happens. Um, and so that kind of opened my eyes, and that relates to the TED Talk. He was someone who had witnessed it growing up in foster care, and he had seen stuff happen before, and then he encountered this guy who had no idea. He had never experienced anything, and he tried to open his mind. And you know, I was, I don't want to say fortunate enough, but I was able to witness it, and I shouldn't have had to witness it to believe it. Um, and so that's kind of where this discussion is going, is like, how can we, at least this is what my idea for the discussion was how can we, help people understand that it's happening, it's still happening, without having them experience it firsthand. Because I'm part of the problem where, I didn't listen. I didn't believe that this was real. I watched the news and I said, this is, propaganda. This is a bunch of BS. And um, I recognize that I was part of the problem. And now I'm trying to do what I can to better or, make up for that. And I know it's hard to do that. But yeah, so does anyone have anything they'd like to ask me, or we can start opening up the discussion? I don't know, Jenny, if you had anything.
No, thank you, Matt, for sharing. And I will say, for those of you, and hopefully everybody has watched the TED Talk, but for those who didn't, just to give you a quick overview, it was a young white man who was speaking about how he tries to talk to people who have different backgrounds than him, who have different ideas about, sorry, my daughter's here now, who have different ideas about, don't believe that racism is real, and how we can take our stories, listen to their stories, and how combining them together, we can find a way to start convincing people to basically start turning people anti-racist. And I know I struggle with that too, of how to effectively persuade people, which it sounds terrible because it's like, we shouldn't, to think about having to persuade somebody that somebody's life matters. To me, I'm just like, no, if they can't understand that, then why am I even bothering? And I struggle with that daily. So I'll open it up to everybody else while I take care of this. I'm sorry.
Matt, I have a question for you. First, thanks for sharing. So, you played college football, you're on a team, you're an offensive lineman in Oklahoma. Your roommates are Black, but I'm guessing there are some of the other offensive linemen were not, and maybe the white players may have been from also Oklahoma or Kansas, in those areas. Maybe never grew up around any person of color. What did you do, or are you still working on how to talk to them? Did you try to talk to them? Did you try to kind of be an intermediary to try to help educate them, since you kind of were in this waking up mode around white privilege?
At first, no. To be 100% honest, not at all. I was kind of going through it myself, and I was still trying to understand it. I don't know how much, or if anybody's really familiar with what happened at Oklahoma State this past summer. The head coach was wearing an OAN, what is it? OAN shirt. The news, or the racist propaganda news source, and our star running back spoke up and said, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to boycott workouts and practice until we get, some sort of change to happen. Long story short, we came together as a team. A bunch of guys met with Coach Gundy. We got it all situated, figured out. Gundy made his remarks, said that he realized now that he was in the wrong, didn't understand. Now he does. But what happened when Chuba Hubbard is the running back, when he stepped up, a bunch of the team, like other teammates, started, speaking up and saying, we're supporting you. And we had a group message with just the O-linemen, and there was probably half and half. Half of us were like, yeah, let's do it. I'd say there was half, an eighth, and then the rest. The eighth were the guys who were like, yeah, let's boycott workouts because we don't want to work out, not because they cared whatsoever. And then there's a couple guys who were like, we don't understand what he did wrong. And so we, the group of us who were like supporting Chuba, we did start to, that really fueled that conversation, and it opened up that path for us to start talking about it. And I think a lot of guys started to realize, yeah, there's a problem. I definitely say there's probably some guys who still don't understand it. They sadly probably won't. There's a lot of kids who grew up in towns of 40 people, and their first experience even seeing a Black person outside of a television was college. So yeah, that at first, sorry, that was a really long answer to your question, but Yeah, at first I'd say no, not at all. Didn't really start that conversation at all. And thankfully, Chuba spoke up and he started that conversation for all of us to where, as O-line, as the O-line group, we could start to have that conversation at a more intimate level.
So, hi everyone, I'm Kirsten. One of the things that really resonated with me, Matt, a lot of the things did that you talked about, but one was, as you talked about, kind of having to witness something. And I'm going to guess it was probably 10 years ago. It was several years ago here in Chaska. The police chief hosted a community It's Time to Talk. I happened to be the only community member there because it was mainly his staff, but it was a pretty diverse group. And what was through the conversation, and it was very open, very vulnerable in some cases conversation, I learned about things that were happening all around me that I never saw. And until someone pointed out, for example, a Black man in our group said, when I walk into a room, women will pull their purse closer, move their purse to the other side. And I thought, oh my gosh, I probably do that. I probably see that all the time and I've never seen it. And it was because of that kind of conversation that I started to be able to see things that I hadn't seen before, both in myself and in others. And so I'm curious what you have found to be helpful in terms of having conversations with people that one, you may be scared to have, where you don't know what to say, or you're scared somebody's going to say something or ask you a question that you don't know how to answer, that you don't have an answer for. What are some things that you found have helped you have those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, first off, if I don't know the answer to something, I'm gonna straight up tell them, I don't know. I'm not gonna sit there and lie, and I'm not gonna try and, come up with some fake statistic or whatever. I'm gonna tell them I don't know the answer. I can try and find out an answer for you. That's how I would start with that. In terms of, having that tough conversation, it's really up to each person. I like I said, this is a hard question for me to answer because there's people in my life who sadly I've tried to have the conversation with, who I know are like not there yet, and they just don't want to listen. So the first thing you need to do when you start that conversation, at least in my opinion, is make sure that they're open to listening. Because if you have a conversation with someone who's already made up their mind, it's like playing chess with a pigeon. No matter what move you make, the pigeon's still going to knock around all the pieces on the board. So just make sure people are open to what you want to say, and they're open to listening. And also make sure there's a healthy discourse, to where they're giving, like, they're talking back. You don't want to just be throwing information at people and then be like nodding, okay, yeah, and not really taking in any of the information. So yeah, so I don't know if that answered the question, but
And I guess open it up to others too who want to respond to, is it Kirsten's question, which was really great. And I think that's very helpful for us to share our experiences.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for talking about this. So I was actually having a conversation with one of my good friends that lives out in Seattle, and we were really talking about how in the political polarized environment we're in right now, like, it's either you get it or you don't, kind of, and it's very much like pointing the finger. And like, when people have point the finger at them like, hey, you're racist, or that's racist, like, they don't automatically shut down, because people are more afraid of being called racist than actually being racist. And when that's a trigger where they'll shut down immediately, right? And so we were just kind of talking. We haven't fully put this into practice, but it's more of like, the people want to be heard at the end of the day, right? So let's say, talk about some sort of interaction with, like, a person of color, like, ask them, why do you feel that way? What makes you think, oh, they're going to be dangerous, or they're going to do something illegal? Like, where does that come from? And like, try to understand their perspective, as hard as that is to do, because, racism is wrong. Often it's like, why should we give them the benefit of the doubt to listen to what they have to say when they're doing horrible things, like, doing racist things, or being silent in the face of oppression. It's really difficult. And, I'm a person of color, but I'm South Asian by nationality. And, it's, as a non-Black ally, I think it's kind of a space where I can have those conversations a little more with a bit of more listening potentially. Unfortunately, that's kind of the case, the world we're in today. But yeah, like think about how your ally, how you as a non-Black ally, like how can you use your privilege, like facilitate a tough conversation where, somebody that's a Black person, like I would never expect them to like show that much empathy or sympathy towards a racist white person. Like that's so much generational trauma. There's so much there. Like that's not fair to expect for them to teach us what's wrong. Like they've experienced it for centuries. Like it's our turn to do the work at the end of the day. And this is one way to do it. And I hope that in practice it could be spread more, but it's just my thought on that.
Thank you.
I just want to back up my guy Bharat. I agree with what he said. I think for me personally, I look at non-Black allies to do just that, to jump into these conversations and really spearhead them fearlessly, because it's taxing on us to have those conversations. And as a person of color, no matter like what environment you're in, you don't know what the reaction is going to be to that. I've done it in a professional environment, and there's fear that this goes sideways. Maybe I don't get that promotion. Maybe I don't get that project. Maybe people look at me a little bit differently. And like I said before, it's taxing. Everything that's happened in the last 3 weeks, you're juggling that through your mind. You're trying to, for me, I tend to disassociate because that's how I can get things done. I'm not in a position to have those conversations with white people. I'm not apologetic towards it. Bharat knows this very well. And so I think that's why I just wanted to echo what he said, that's what I look for out of allies, to just really be fearless in that, and be willing to sit down with people that they might not agree with. And this isn't my only identity. I'm not just a guy that identifies as Black. I'm also a guy that identifies as straight. I'm willing to sit down with people that I think are homophobic and talk to them about that stuff. So I think everybody's got their lane, and I just want to say, like, that's what I expect from people who are going to support our community.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, I have one question. I'm a 13-year-old, so in my school, I go to middle school, and like majority of my school is white. But honestly, I feel like I'm like one of the only Black people there, and like it's especially good to have like white youth learn about it before they go into like college or high school and before they make too much mistakes. So I was thinking, like, how are we going to start these conversations? Because all these white people, they don't have Black friends, and I'm like 100% sure they're not willing to start these conversations. So what do you think on like white youth, and like how do you think they will start these conversations? Like, will the parents teach them, or like how will they be able to start these conversations?
Well,
For everyone or matter? I was confused by the audience, or who was expected to answer that.
I have a point of view on that, so I'll throw it out there for what it's worth. Yes, I think that parents definitely have a role. However, what you said about kids not having white kids, maybe not having Black friends, and white kids not knowing how to or not wanting to step into the conversation, same thing with parents. And so, yes, I think it's the role of parents. However, my question is, what's the best way to equip parents to have those conversations? Because I think many of them are ill-equipped. And but yeah, I think in the home is where it starts, and it's the conversations and it's the actions as well. But yeah, so it's a good question. It's a very good question.
And
We actually go ahead, Tracy.
Who's talking? Oh, hey, Ed, and I could totally sympathize. I hear what you're saying. And actually, Donnie and Bharat used to walk the same halls you used to walk many years ago here in this district. I think a lot of it too kind of falls on the school and what kind of an identity they want to have as a school. What do they help facilitate within the building? What kind of climate? What kind of groups do they allow to form within the school to try to help bridge some of those gaps? And then two, something we've been pushing like here locally in District 112, where I live in, where we're at in Chaska, is we need to change the curriculum that the kids are learning from elementary all the way through, make it more multicultural. We've pushed for some changes here in the district the last few years, and we now have a new superintendent, assistant superintendent, but we just got to keep pushing. But I think a lot of it falls onto the school as well, because we had school walkouts statewide yesterday in Minnesota. And you could kind of tell the identities of the schools with how many kids actually felt comfortable to walk out and what that was like once they were out there. Chaska High School, I heard, was kind of monitored by the principal. He was kind of lurking around with a walkie-talkie and talking and being disruptive. Chanhassen had like 100 kids walk out. Minnetonka had probably double that amount that walked out, and they all had signs and were very, comfortable to go out and protest and raise their voices. So, yeah, I don't have a perfect answer, but I think a lot of it relies is on the school as well.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ed and I was going to also say that this is perfect because this is really what ARC is all about. So our mission is we feel like there's enough organizations that are working on legislation. Black Lives Matter is trying to change legislation, like get the Justice and Policing for George Floyd bill passed. They're putting a lot of lobby pressure on that. You got other organizations like the NAACP or the Human Rights Campaign that's focused on LGBTQ, IA2 spirit. They're working on legislation. What ARC is about is trying to change people's hearts. And our belief is that we can change enough people's hearts, they will eventually, we're not going to change everyone, but if we can get 60% of the people to adopt anti-racism, they will then use their influence, their vote, to get the right people in influential roles, whether that's in government or in the schools. But that will mean that white parents, like many of you that are on this call, and even if you're not a parent, you have friends, you have other family, at some point you have to start saying, I want to understand what it takes to be an anti-racist. And then you have to then start influencing your friends and family. If that doesn't happen, it's not going to change. It's just that simple. No matter how many laws are changed, if people allow racists to be racist and still be friends with them, then nothing's going to change. I got my second vaccination shot about 3 weeks ago. You'd think I would be ecstatic about finally getting vaccinated. I wasn't really that ecstatic, but the thing that made me really happy that day is I saw this big burly white guy. And this dude probably was like 6'6", 300 pounds. He was dressed in black, had a long beard. He, to me, and this is me being honest with you, I prejudged him and I said, that guy looks like he's one of those Oath Keepers or something like that. He looks like a white supremacist to me. And that's how I felt. It's wrong. And I got to keep working on that because I prejudged his appearance. I only saw him from behind and from the side. Then he turned around and walked towards me. And I read his t-shirt. His t-shirt said, I don't drink beer with racists. And then below it said, Black Lives Matter. That made my week. I'm still on cloud 9 from seeing that because that's what it's going to take. That will change people like me's mind and change, some of the other people of color's minds about people. But more importantly, he's telling folks that this is not about legislation. This is about, am I going to allow a racist to be my friend? Are you going to allow your neighbors to be racist and you still invite them to the barbecue? Are you going to allow the school board to have, to reject equity and then you don't say anything? You only let the parents of color show up to talk about it. You don't go there and say anything. It really comes down to that. So from my perspective, it's about everyone on this call, especially our white folks here, to say, I'm going to do something. And that means educate yourself, transform to be an anti-racist, and hold the people around you accountable to do the same thing. That's when you'll start seeing change. When some of those parents who are not on that side, when their friends start treating them a little bit differently, then they start maybe asking some questions. Maybe I do need to look at this differently. Maybe they start having conversations with their kids. And then their kids start saying, well, maybe I need to get to know Adonai. Maybe something's not quite right in the way I've been taught. So that's kind of how that's what we're trying to do.
Thank
By the
you.
way, Adonai's one of our volunteers. She's only 13 and she is taking some big leadership roles, by the way.
And just to plug Adonai as well, so our next community and action event in June, she is going to be facilitating that conversation about the youth and what the hopes for the future and how we can get there. So I just wanted to plug that too. I also wanted to bring
And
up one.
I'd like to
go
just say
ahead. Nope.
something.
Go ahead, Adrienne, I'm sorry.
And I think, you know, when I'm sitting here listening, and we do need you to speak up, because I've been in situations myself where something was said that was offensive to me, but I was the only person of color present. And I know that if I had responded, I would come across as angry Black woman, and then I'm the bad guy. And so that's to me where it's really important. And everybody else just sat there, and I took it, and I'm tired of taking it, because again, if I respond, I'm not going to be nice. And so that's where we need, you know, the people around us, especially if you say that you are not racist, to speak up.
Thank you, Adrienne. I was just gonna follow up on that, as I completely agree with everybody that it's my responsibility, white people's responsibility, to be talking to other white people and doing the hard work. And that's what ARC is dedicated to. And I will say, as far as for me, what motivates me and what gets me to speak up is that, first of all, I feel like if I don't say something, I think about it and it eats away at me, like week after week, month after month. Like I can recall conversations from high school where, why didn't I say something? And I still regret not sticking up for somebody. So that's what motivates me to say something. And I will say that as hard as it is, and as I hate to say, why are we afraid to say something to our own friends and neighbors? But the more you practice saying something and responding, the easier it gets to do it more often. So I will say, the first time I tried to do it at work, it went terribly. The second time it went terribly, but it got easier for me to express what I was trying to say to somebody, especially an older white man who didn't understand what I was trying to get at. And it went terrible, but I still could live with myself at the end of the day. Like, okay, it went terrible, but at least I said something. And I think that a way to respond when people say something racist or make a racist joke is to, I don't want to say play dumb, but say, what did you mean by that? Like, get them to respond. Like, don't laugh along with the joke. Ask them, well, what did you mean? Make them explain the fact that, oh, it's funny because, you know, I think Black people so-and-so. And then you respond with, well, you know, acknowledging that that's a racist trope, or that's something you shouldn't, you know. So that I feel like that's a particular way that I try and address something if it comes up in a conversation. But I just, yeah, I appreciate people having these conversations and people being honest in their frustration and their exhaustion with putting up with this continually. So
this may be an extremely ignorant question, but I've had many instances where I feel very comfortable like calling out my white peers in white spaces. But when there are instances where white people exhibit racism towards XYZ racialized person, I feel like if I address it in the group setting, I'm speaking for the person of color. And that makes me, like, that feels awkward to me. So I've opted to pull them aside in one-on-one interactions. But I feel like I want to figure out a way to address people in a group setting so that I like don't speak for people, but I don't know how to do that. Does anyone have any thoughts or like ways that they've tried that, or recommendations?
I could actually answer some of that. From my personal perspective, I think you're right that in a big group setting like that, where there are power dynamics and there's somebody that's the only minority, putting that pressure on them might not be the best thing for them. Even though, you know, speaking up might sound like the right thing, at that moment, it might not be the right thing. The second thing is, I don't know where you're at, but I know a lot of people are in Chaska or Chanhassen. in those settings, those are smaller towns and people tend to know each other. And in these group settings in general, people, tend to have connections with each other. They know each other. Calling somebody out like that in public, well, I might do it sometimes, but calling people out in public sometimes like that can backfire because then folks feel defensive. And then they're like, oh, this guy's calling me a racist. One of my good buddies, a white dude, told me, he's like, as a white dude, the most offensive thing you could do to another white person is accuse them of being a racist. So if you do that in a group setting, that might backfire. But if you pull them aside, you call them in one-on-one and you say, hey man, like, this is what you said. This is why I think it was wrong. This is how it impacted so-and-so. Hey, they might not agree with you, but you have a much better chance of getting through to them because now you're going out of your way to say, hey, I think you messed up here and I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to extend a hand so that you can learn from that in the future. If you do that in the group setting, you say, hey man, you were wrong, then everyone's gonna, ooh, look what he's doing. He's in trouble. So I think that's the right approach. I don't have like a perfect answer for how to approach those situations all the time, but I've done it before and it was beneficial.
But me again, sorry to interrupt. So what about if he doesn't do it in the group setting, then that person of color that was racially harmed didn't see the interaction that someone called him out, so they just think no one said anything?
Oh, like what happened to me?
Which time?
When I was in 7th grade. So whoever
Oh.
goes to Chaska East, I got called the N-word, and so you can,
Yeah.
that's what was still going on back then, mid 2000s.
But I'm just saying, should it be addressed in a group setting in a way that doesn't
well, I'm
point the
speaking.
person out and then you talk to him again later?
Well, I'm talking about that particular incident because I think it still applies. Even though I was really young, the situation, something happened in 7th grade. I don't remember what it was. It was almost 20 years ago. But someone had called me the N-word or something like that, and I didn't hear them. I didn't hear what was said, but I found out later because I got called into the office, and the kid had like told like the principal or somebody that this kid had said this about me. And so I think it's tricky there. What you were saying, like if they don't know, like how should you approach it if they don't know if they were?
Yeah, if it happens in a group, like Auntie Lynn or Adrian was just saying,
Yeah.
something happens, no one says anything, and then she, doesn't feel comfortable saying anything, or she'll be seen a certain way. If you pull the person aside and deal with it after the fact,
Then the person would never know that happened.
Yes, that's what I'm wondering.
Oh, I mean, I would want to know who to watch out for if somebody said that about me. I'm only talking about my experience, but in that situation, I would have liked to, I liked that I was in a private setting when they told me about it and it wasn't in like a group setting. Hey, guess what happened? That they pulled me aside. Hey, this is what happened. This is what the kid said. This is what's going to happen to him now. Here's the consequences. But I do think it's important for that person to know. But I can't speak for everyone because not all minorities are going to think the same. We're not all a monolith. Everybody's got their own thing. I want to know who to watch out for. So I'd want to know. So if it's someone you know, you're going to know more about them. Like you're going to know what their preferences are.
Yeah, the funny thing about it is that sometimes nobody still says anything. So I have a situation, I'm the only person of color, Black person in my department. So to me, I'm probably the most memorable because I'm the only one like me. So the chairman of the board doesn't know me. I've been there 5 years, and in fact, there was he asked for a meeting with my sister, and so I arranged the meeting and went to introduce him. And then when we got to the meeting, he asked my sister, "Who is she?" Meaning me, and I'm the one that set up the meeting. And so interestingly, this past Monday, we had a staff meeting, and so I brought it up to my coworkers, and instead of, again, anybody saying anything, I got a text message that said, "Paget continues to be such an ass around you. You are special, important, and a big part of our success." Well, they say that to me.
Yes.
But they don't say anything to him, and that's supposed to make me feel good. But it really doesn't, because you don't have the gall to stand up to him or any of you. And so I have to just take it. Because, if I say something, I'm the bad person. And so, or maybe I'm being too sensitive. So, they don't say anything in most cases. Nobody says anything.
Yeah,
You know,
I would, go ahead.
Okay, I was recently in a discussion where what you reminded me of, Adrienne, was this conversation about being an ally versus an advocate, and the way it was described, and it really stuck with me, is that what you described, that text message, ally, I'm here for you, and and I saw that, I heard that, and that's awesome. And the advocate would have spoken up in that meeting and said, here, and so that for me, I was always like, I'm a great ally. And I think I am a pretty good ally. However, I went, look at all the times I've missed that opportunity to be an advocate. And so that was really helpful for me to understand that, yes, there's different ways to take action. There's different ways to show support and to be a part of this. And there's often more that we can do.
Yes. Hello, this is Carlos. If I offer something, when I hear in these conversations, another thing that I like to offer is really, it's about, it's speaking for you, it's the I in the conversation. I don't think, you don't need to feel like, how did the color person feel? What if what's powerful is that this is how I felt when you said something about colored people, Black people, Hispanic people, gay people. This is how I feel. So I think, to me, that's what I offer, that to me in those situations, don't make it about them or us, it's about I, because that's more powerful, especially with people that you have connections, either to work or through your family or friends, because it's you that is saying, that goes against my values, that goes against what I believe. So I think I offer that. And just to go back to what Matt said, in his thinking, when his openness, another thing that was very powerful, what he said, is the power of observation. That's part of when we started learning, just observe, you're seeing the patterns and the system that we develop. And then we can even put a list and say, if I was a Hispanic, they would be afraid to cash a check, or they will double check the check. So you do very mundane things that you take for granted that you do it every day. And then this help you open that observation. And then you bring it to the eye, say, this is how I feel when you said that. This is what we need to change. And that's more powerful than put the burden in the person of color. That's something that I have learned through the power of observation.
Yeah, I will get back to Jeremiah's question. I do think it's situational, because there are times where, if you feel like a person of color is being attacked, you need to say something. Do not wait, say something. If you feel like it's a subtle thing, it's a microaggression, then I would handle it offline. Then I would let the person of color know that you did. If the same person does it again, at that point, that might be strike two. Talk to them again. The third time, I will call them out in front of some other people. Because again, this is where if these things are allowed to continue, the message is it's okay. So you talk to them 10 times, you keep doing it, it's okay. So, and then the other thing I was going to get back to is this word ally. And I brought this up on a meeting this morning. So I don't understand how this word has been co-opted by corporate America to mean something the opposite of what it's supposed to be. If you just look at World War II, right? There was the Axis powers and the Allies. So the United States was an ally to France. When France was being attacked by the Nazis, did the United States say, we empathize with you, but we're not coming there? No, they got on ships, they sailed there, and they got involved in the war. They defended France, they kicked the Nazis out, and they marched on Germany, took Berlin. That's what an ally does. An ally fights for you. And allies want to put themselves in a line. The way we define it in corporate America is basically, if someone's beating me up, the ally's saying, I feel sorry for you, I empathize with you, but they're not intervening. This is why it's so frustrating for people of color in corporate America, because they feel like that most white people have a pass with this ally thing, that they can just kind of be kind of on the fringe, but not really have to do anything. And so that's what I would tell you is with white privilege, the biggest issue is that we got to help people understand that racism is not a person of color problem. It's a white people problem. So the only way to solve it is other white people have to address other white people. Until that happens, it's not going to go away. And I tell people this, I had a long talk with my neighbor one day, because this, he sent me an email about my grass being 1 inch over the sidewalk like 2 days after George Floyd was murdered. So I went off on him on email. Right? They went off on him on email professionally. We wanted to have a talk. So I talked to him in my backyard, and he didn't understand what racism was. I'd explain it. And he said, well, racism will never end. So how do you know that, that you've gotten somewhere? And I said, well, we would have gotten somewhere when the racist is viewed as a pariah in society. When you view a racist as a pedophile, that's where I know we've gotten somewhere. Because you won't have beer with a pedophile. You wouldn't allow a pedophile to come to your house for a barbecue. You wouldn't go hang out with a pedophile. But you hang out with racists. And until that changes, that's really the biggest issue with white privilege. It's I don't have that choice. Most people we don't have that choice. So we got to be involved. We go to a protest, we can't come back and put our signs in the garage and no one knows we went to a protest, so our neighbors don't know. No, they know I'm Black, so they know Tracy probably went to a protest. They know I'm here. I can't hide. That's the kind of thing that has to change when it comes to white privilege. That's why I really love the video that the TED Talk. Whoever picked that out, thanks for picking it out. But anyway, I just wanted to answer that. And this whole thing with Ally, oh man, it really grinds me.
I know I talked a lot, so this is the last thing I'm going to say, but I just wanted to add on to what you were saying about being corporate America. I think the word for what you're saying is that it's a lot of performative allyship. And we see that everywhere where people want to put the little sticker on and they want to say, no, I'm an ally to this community. And I saw folks do it at my old job, and they're the same people that voted for Trump. It's all for optics. And so you don't want to be one of those people. You want to be one of the people that's going to go in the trenches and fight. And so I think that's a good point. Don't be performative. Don't just put the little social media post up. Do something. Put your skin, get some skin in the game. Put it that way.
I kind of want to go back to that when you were talking about when you got your vaccine, Dad, and how you said it was probably wrong that you assumed that guy was racist. But I kind of disagree with that, because I think it's different than a white person being scared of a Black person without knowing them first. I feel like it's more of a safety thing. You don't know if those people, if that person is racist, you don't know what they're going to do to you. So I feel like it's more of a safety issue. So I don't think that's wrong to do. I get what you were saying, that you shouldn't just judge people, but that's what I think about that.
Well, and I think you're right, because with a Black person, you already know I'm Black. I mean, you only know I'm gay if I tell you I'm gay. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I walk in, I'm Black. But and I probably do the same thing. I will look at somebody that has a whole bunch of tattoos and bald head and a beard and think, I get a little nervous because mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know. So I get it. I get it as well.
Yeah.
As a 6'6", 320-pound white man who used to have a beard and has tattoos, how do you change that? I mean, how do I've probably come across to some people like that, and I have some shirts. I know, Donsley, you said that he was wearing that shirt, and that was the only way he knew that he wasn't a racist, was because he had that shirt on. But it's my whole wardrobe isn't shirts that are, I can't wear a shirt like that every day to announce that I'm not a racist. So what is it that we can do as large white tattooed men to help change that narrative?
That's a great one, man. I'll give you a couple of examples. That was one. So he's wearing a shirt, but not everyone can do that. I think leveraging social media to speak out. There's a lot of women actually speak out, both Black women and white women, but we don't really see a lot of white guys that speak out, especially what I'd say, ones that are like, that are big. You don't see those guys really speaking out that much, saying anything. You don't see them going public or anything like that. So I'd say starting that trend and saying those kinds of things, I think would be helpful. I was shocked the other day. Tracy and I went down to Brooklyn Center. Look, I don't know exactly what these guys were there for, but we were there at Brooklyn Center. There's mostly, there was a lot of people who were different, a lot of people of color, but there were a lot of white people, some Africans, some Indian people, but a couple of literal biker gang guys. They rode by once and they came through again and they parked. And I wasn't sure what these guys were going to do. I mean, literally these dudes look like biker gangs. They had like the skull on the back of the jacket and all these things. And they parked and they just stood there and looked around. And a Black guy went over and asked them for a smoke, and they gave him a smoke. Now maybe they were scouting things out. I don't know, but it actually was kind of good that they showed up, in my opinion. To me, I think having white men actually show up more and do, actually speak out more will change the perspective. It will change the perception. We just don't have a lot of it. So I would encourage you to keep speaking out, to and be loud about it and let people know, hey, yep, I'm a big white guy. Yep, I'm from the Midwest. Yep, I'm from the Great White North, like you told your story. That's what I would say. And then say, but I support Black Lives Matter, or I'm for these things. I think that would be awesome. Those are some of the things you could do.
Or put it on the back of your truck, Matt. Matt.
Like you did. Great.
Yeah.
And we got a couple, I'm curious if I see like John Hayes is on. By the way, John Hayes owns Enki Brewing. So any of you guys who are living, you've got to go to Enki Brewing. And so John, I hate to put you on the spot, but could you tell a couple stories of kind of your journey?
Well, my first thought was lose weight, try not to be as big, but you can't help what you look like. I think that's what the message is you are what you are. And I understand why someone like Donzel might say, ooh, that guy looks a little scary. The way you described him, he looks scary to me too. And the thing, so I think you have to be understanding of people having a natural reaction based on their own experiences, their own history. But I think what I'm trying to learn to do is pause and question myself and ask why. And judge my reaction to say, is it prejudicial? Or is it correct? I mean, there may be a true threat from someone, regardless of what color they are. And as I was anticipating this meeting, I was thinking about the term white privilege. And I was kind of expecting a different conversation because shortly after the George Floyd murder, I was talking with my sister. And I said, I don't understand what white privilege means. It's foreign to me. And she says, well, you have to watch this video. And it was Adam Danya, I think I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but he put together this tremendous video that, and I'm sure everybody on the screen here has seen it, where he does kind of a social test where he poses all these statements. If you've ever had to worry about where your next meal is coming from, take one step back. If you've ever had to provide income for your family, take one step back. And what you see is the net effect of all these things that children of color were subjected to through no fault of their own that put them at great disadvantage to the white kids. And what was really striking for me was you could see the emotion on some of these kids' face. You know, the idea is that they're going in a race, right, for $100 bill. And all the black kids are in the back and all the white kids are in the front. So they got a huge head start. And the despair and the discouragement on the face of these black kids was profound. And that to me is the white privilege, that these white kids, through no action of their own, were given advantage. I was given advantage. And it's hard to see that because it's subtle, it's over time. And even though it's subtle and over time, it's insidious, it's profound. And so that was my big step, I think, in my journey of saying, oh, I all of a sudden got why across the globe there was such a violent, and I don't mean necessarily violent physically, but just violent emotional reaction to the George Floyd murder.
I mean, the thought that I have, Matt, in answer to your question is, you know, it's about being overt about where you stand, you know. So I heard a quote this morning that was about, you know, allyship is about walking in solidarity with, you know, those that are marginalized communities and actively unlearning and relearning sort of the privileges that we may have. And, you know, I think Donzel's example about, you know, there's a guy that is, you know, overt about where he stands and who he walks in solidarity with. And if we don't have enough t-shirts to make that message clear, we better show it in other ways, in our actions and our other words. And, you know, and sometimes those are things about just, you know, saying good morning and being cheerful and greeting. And Donzel, to your point, you know, walking over to these guys that came to the protest and you know, engaging with them, right? And those are some things that I think we can do as allies to make sure that how we look, you know, who we are, you know, sort of is very clearly understood, not just based on how we look or how others perceive us, but it's got to be overt and it's got to be about taking action. And, you know, Adonai, the response that I had as you were asking, like, you know, how do we change things? You know, to me, it's about, you know, those that are that you feel the most in common with, or the most respect for, or, you know, the most solidarity with, are probably going to be the ones who you listen to most, right? In some cases, that's parents, might be teachers, might be, you know, clergy, whatever. And that's where I think the onus is on people that have privilege, like I do, to speak up to those who are more like me, so that my words perhaps carry more credibility with them because I am more like them. And so I've got to use that advantage that I have to be overt in who I stand with and what I stand for. You know, and the other quote that, you know, and this gets back to Carlos's, sorry for rambling on here, Carlos's comment is about making it really personal, right? And it's not about me being a white savior for anybody in a marginalized community and making them the victims, but it is about, you know, a quote I heard, which was, if we don't act on injustice, we corrupt our own good. And it's the fact that, you know, I'm sure if Donnie hears comments like that directed at him, that he feels pretty darned uncomfortable. Well, guess what? I do too. And that's what I need to take a stand on in that group setting, Jeremiah, that, you know, would be, you know, here's how I am uncomfortable when I hear those things because of what I believe. And, you know, and if I don't say something in a, you know, avoid charged language and so on. I know there are a lot of words, you know, like, you know, white supremacy and white privilege and so on, that a lot of people have conscripted to mean a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, you know, I can be really clear that, you know, that's an offensive comment to me, and you know, and make sure that that's clear in the situation. And if I don't do that, then I corrupt my own good in this situation, and I'm not overt and what I stand for and who I walk in solidarity with. So those are a couple of things that I've thought over the course of the conversation.
Thank you both. Those are really great comments. I appreciate you guys speaking up.
I was going to ask Edson if maybe he had any perspective on how white privilege might translate in Brazil. Do you see anything similar to this, Edson, in Brazil? And what does it, do you hear similarities or anything that's familiar?
Well, I feel like it makes a lot of sense, all the discussion. And I was just typing with Ricardo Vasquez because he lived in Brazil. So we have a lot of things in common to learn from this session. And it makes total sense, Donzo. As we have been talking to you during the latest conversations regarding how similar are situations in the United States, how they impact the world, and how it makes a lot of sense in Brazil. It's very, it's quite similar. So I feel like it's not that it's the same, because we believe that we are more miscegenated than the United States. And because we have, I would say, castes, like you have white people, very, very rich with very good conditions in Brazil. And on the flip side, you have, you've been here, you know the country, you know our situation here. So there is a lot to do. And I fully agree that we must not get corrupted by doing nothing, okay? So it makes a lot of sense to me, Donzo.
Thanks, Edson. It is 8 o'clock and I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. Is there anybody, I guess real quick, is there anybody who didn't say something or wanted to say, provide any thoughts before we go?
Are there any reactions to the verdict anyone wants to share?
Not the verdict, but I will tell you that I've been reading the book,
Color of Law?
The Color of Law, and it makes me very angry and very sad. So I'm struggling because it does make me very, very sad and very disappointed. And so, yeah.
So just know, one of the things so Chad actually did a great job of describing what we're trying to do at ARC. Our belief is that if we're not trying to change the races, they're not going to listen to what I have to say. Our view is if we can contact you and educate you on what anti-racism is and the difference between anti-racism and not being a racist and activating all the things that Chad said, you have the credibility, people that you know that are close to you, to find a way in to influence them to change. That's the greatest way we're going to be able to drive change. And so it starts though with transforming yourself. We're all in different places. None of us are experts. We're all volunteers, all different places. We're kicking off this development process where we're going through 6 different sessions of learning together to kind of create a common base understanding of what anti-racism is and what it truly means to be an anti-racist. If any of you are interested in that, let us know. Our first session is on May 15th. It does require some work. So we're reading a book that's called Color of Law. I believe it's the best book from a United States perspective to understand the disparities that exist that create the racial division that we have. Everything you can think about, the educational disparities, wealth, incarceration, police brutality, I believe are all explained in this book. That's why Adrian Lynn is telling you it's upsetting to read. You'll also see in this book, Minneapolis and St. Paul are very prominently represented in that book. So if any of you are interested, let us know. We'll get you included in this process. We believe it's the cornerstone of what we're trying to do with ARC, which ultimately is about transforming each person to be anti-racist so that you can then spread it with the people that respect you, that you have the opportunity that they'll listen to you, that they won't listen to us. That was my public service announcement.
Hey, Donzel, you cut out a little bit. What is the session on May 15th? What's the name of it? And is it a one session or multiple sessions? Or?
Yeah, thank you, Rochelle. It's 6 sessions between May 15th and September 11th.
Okay.
And they're all on Saturday mornings, I think from 9 to 10:30. So if you're interested, shoot me an email and I'll get you all the details. Again, it does require some learning, some reading, some work on your part, some pre-work. But we feel that it's going to really dramatically increase our understanding and common base knowledge of what anti-racism is about. So.
Thanks, Donzel. Thank you everyone for participating and for sharing. And for those of you who shared just, your words and your thoughts that are going to get posted, hopefully this will help convince others and give other people the courage to start, making that change and talking to their neighbors. So thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you in June, where Ed and I is going to lead a discussion for us. And I guess stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a great evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jenny.
Bye.